The dust came first. Always the dust in Sundrift, rolling through the streets like something alive, something hungry. It coated the wooden planks of the saloon, settled into the creases of worn leather boots, and filled the lungs of anyone fool enough to breathe too deep. Mara Vale had been breathing it for 3 weeks now, and it hadn't gotten easier. She stood outside Briggs's general store, with a split lip and dirt ground into her knees, trying to remember what pride felt like. The answer wasn't coming. "Freakish thing, ain't she?" The voice belonged to Dalton Mace, a ranch hand with hands like slabs of meat, and a face that suggested his mother had been frightened by something ugly during pregnancy. He stood with 2 others, Vernon Kitch and a younger man Mara didn't know the name of, watching her with the kind of casual malice people reserve for animals they're considering putting down. Mara didn't look up. Didn't need to. She'd seen that look enough times to paint it from memory. "Heard she killed her own kin back east," Vernon offered, spitting tobacco juice that landed too close to Mara's hand. "Witchcraft or poison, depending on who's telling it." "Nah." The younger man scratched his stubbled jaw. "I heard she spread fever through a whole settlement, 30 dead in 2 weeks. None of it was true. Not a word. But truth didn't matter in places like Sundrift. Only the story mattered, and Mara's story had been written before she ever set foot in town. She'd arrived on a supply wagon 3 weeks back, paying her way by helping unload crates. The driver, a Bible-reading man named Herschel, had been kind enough at first. Asked her name, where she was headed, the usual things. She'd given him the first, stayed quiet on the second. By the time they rolled into Sundrift, his kindness had curdled into something else. He'd seen the ring on her finger, tarnished silver, too small now, cutting into the flesh, and asked about her husband. "Dead," she'd said. "How?" "Does it matter?" Apparently it did. By nightfall, Herschel had spread word that Mara was a widow of suspicious circumstances. By the next morning, the whispers had grown teeth. Cursed. Black widow. Unclean. In another town, maybe it wouldn't have stuck, but Sundrift was the kind of place where cruelty was currency and boredom bred violence. They'd needed someone to hate, and Mara had arrived gift-wrapped. "You gonna get up, or you planning to make a home down there?" Dalton's boot prodded her shoulder. Not quite a kick, but close enough. Mara's jaw tightened. Slowly, carefully, she pushed herself to her feet. Her dress, the only one she owned, was torn at the hem, stained with God knew what. The fabric had been blue once. Now it was the color of defeat. "Where you think you're going?" Vernon stepped into her path, blocking the narrow gap between the store and the saloon. "Away from you." It was the wrong thing to say. It was always the wrong thing to say. Vernon's hand shot out, fingers closing around her upper arm hard enough to bruise. "You got a mouth on you, witch. Someone ought to teach you to shut it." "Let go." "Or what?" He grinned, showing teeth stained brown. "You gonna curse me? Turn my blood to snakes?" The younger man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Mara didn't fight. Fighting made it worse. She'd learned that the hard way. Twice. Once in the alley behind the boarding house where she'd tried to rent a room and been told they didn't house her kind. Once near the water pump when she'd refused to move fast enough for a woman who wanted her spot. Both times, she'd fought. Both times, she'd lost. So now she stood still, Vernon's grip turning her arm numb, and waited for whatever came next. What came next was Dalton grabbing her other arm. "She really is scrawny up close," he said, his breath hot and sour. "Like a scarecrow someone dressed up for fun." "Maybe she's got something under all those rags worth seeing." Vernon's grin widened. "What do you think, witch? You got anything worth our time?" Mara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face stayed blank. A trick she'd learned young: show nothing, give them nothing, let them get bored and move on. Except they weren't moving on. Vernon's free hand reached for the collar of her dress. "I wouldn't." The voice cut through the moment like a blade through silk. Low, rough, and carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. All 3 men froze. Mara turned her head, as much as she could with Dalton still gripping her, and saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that had seen better years and a hat pulled low enough to shadow most of his face. But even in shadow, she could see his eyes. Cold, pale. The kind of eyes that didn't blink much. "Rourke, Vernon's voice had lost its swagger. "We're just having a conversation." Didn't look like conversation to me. The man, Rourke, didn't move closer, but somehow his presence filled the space anyway. Looked like you were about 3 seconds from doing something you'd regret. She's nobody, Dalton said, but his grip loosened. Just some cursed bitch that wandered in. Let her go. It wasn't a request. Dalton's hands dropped like he'd been burned. Vernon took a step back, his earlier confidence evaporating. Mara stood there, suddenly free, her arms aching where they'd been held. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't understand why the stranger cared. Rourke finally looked at her, really looked. His gaze traveled from her split lip to her torn dress to the ring cutting into her finger. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity, something harder than that. Recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing something he understood. You got somewhere to be? He asked her. Mara's throat felt tight. No. You got money? No. Family? Friends? No. He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Then he turned back to Vernon and Dalton. Go on, get out of here. They went, fast. The younger man practically tripped over his own feet in his hurry to leave. Mara and Rourke stood in the empty space they'd left behind, dust swirling between them. Thank you, she managed. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Don't thank me yet. He adjusted his hat, and for a moment she caught a better look at his face. Lined, weathered, a scar running through his left eyebrow. You know who I am? Rourke. That's what they called you. Calder Rourke. He said it like a confession. I own the Iron Stake Ranch, 5 miles west. You know what people say about me? Mara shook her head. They say I killed my first wife. Beat her to death one winter when the snow was too thick for anyone to hear her scream. He watched her face for a reaction. They say I shot a man in the back over a fence dispute and burned down a homestead with a family still inside. Is it true? Does it matter? He threw her own words back at her. In places like this, truth's got nothing to do with anything. He had a point. I'm leaving town day after tomorrow, Rourke continued, heading back to the ranch. You can come with me if you want. Mara's stomach dropped. Why would you? Not for that. His voice was flat. I need a wife. She almost laughed. Would have if her lip wasn't split. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're alive when you shouldn't be, and you don't cry easy. That's more than most can say. He tilted his head slightly. You stay here. You'll be dead inside a month. Maybe less. They'll work up the courage eventually, men like Vernon. They'll decide you're dangerous enough to put down, and nobody's going to stop them. But you did? Today. He let that sit between them. I won't always be here, and I'm only one man. Mara's mind raced, trying to find the trap. There had to be one. Men didn't offer help without wanting something, and what Rourke was offering wasn't help. It was a transaction. What's in it for you? She asked. Protection. He said it simply. I need a wife to keep the vultures off my land. Homestead law says a married man's claim is stronger. And there's a clause in my deed that reverts the land to the territorial government if I die without heirs or kin. A wife fixes that. So you want a legal shield. And you want to survive. He shrugged. Seems fair. It wasn't fair. Nothing about this was fair. But Mara had stopped believing in fair around the same time she'd stopped believing in mercy. What would you expect from me? The question came out harder than she meant. Work. The ranch doesn't run itself. Cooking, mending, helping with livestock when needed. He paused. I've got a separate room. You'd have your own space. I'm not asking for a real marriage, just the paperwork and the appearance. And if I say no? Then you say no. I'll leave you be and you take your chances here. His pale eyes held hers. But we both know how that ends. Mara looked past him, toward the center of town. She could see the saloon from here, the boarding house beyond it, the church with its crooked steeple. In 3 weeks, this place had shown her exactly what it thought of her. She'd been spat on, shoved, denied work, denied shelter, denied basic human decency. Staying meant dying slow. When do we leave? She said. Day after tomorrow, dawn. Rourke turned to go, then stopped. One more thing. That ring. Mara's hand went to it instinctively, protective. It's cutting into you, probably infected. He didn't sound concerned, just factual. You should take it off before it costs you the finger. It's stuck. Then we'll cut it off at the ranch. I've got tools. He tipped his hat, a gesture so old-fashioned it seemed out of place. See you day after tomorrow, Mrs. Vale, or whatever you want to call yourself. He walked away, boots kicking up dust, and disappeared around the corner toward the livery. Mara stood alone in the street, her arms aching, her lip throbbing, her whole body vibrating with something she couldn't name. Hope, maybe, or just the particular terror of jumping from one cliff to another. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Mara had nothing to pack, no belongings beyond the clothes on her back and the rusted ring, but she cleaned herself as best she could with water from the public pump, rinsed the blood from her dress, and tried to look like something other than a ghost. People watched her. They always watched her. But now the watching came with a new edge. Suspicion mixed with confusion. Word had spread that Calder Rourke had intervened on her behalf, and nobody knew what to make of it. You spreading your legs for him already? A woman named Judith hissed as Mara passed her on the boardwalk. Is that how you work your curse? Mara kept walking. Which whore? Someone muttered from a doorway. Mara kept walking. She spent her last night in Sundrift under the overhang of an abandoned stable, listening to rats scratch in the walls and trying not to think about what she was agreeing to. Marriage to a stranger. A man with a reputation for violence. A man who needed her for legal reasons, not human ones. But then, nobody had ever needed her for human reasons. Her husband, her real husband, Thomas, had needed her for labor. For cooking and cleaning and warming his bed when he was drunk enough to want it. When the fever had taken him, slow and ugly, he'd cursed her name with his last breath, blamed her for his pain, for his failure, for every miserable thing in his short, bitter life. She'd buried him with her own hands in ground too frozen to dig properly. She'd marked the grave with a stone. She'd worn the ring because taking it off felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. That she was glad he was gone. That she'd prayed for it, in the dark, in the moments when his fists came down and her ribs cracked and she thought, this is it. This is how I die. The ring had stayed on as punishment. Penance. A reminder that she'd failed at the one thing women were supposed to do. Be soft enough, good enough, silent enough to keep a man happy. Now it was just metal cutting into swollen flesh. And Calder Rourke was right. It would cost her the finger if she didn't deal with it. Dawn came cold and gray. Mara was waiting at the edge of town when Rourke appeared, leading 2 horses and a pack mule. He looked at her for a long moment, as if surprised she'd actually showed up. You ready? He asked. Yes. You sure? Once we're out there, there's no changing your mind. It's a 5-mile ride, and nobody's going to come looking for you if you decide you made a mistake. I'm sure. He nodded and handed her the reins to the smaller horse, a chestnut mare with kind eyes. She's steady. Won't throw you unless you do something stupid. Mara pulled herself into the saddle, her muscles screaming in protest. She hadn't ridden in years, but the body remembered. They rode out of Sundrift as the sun broke over the hills, painting the sky in shades of rust and gold. Mara didn't look back. Didn't need to. There was nothing in that town worth remembering. The land opened up around them, vast and indifferent. Scrub brush and rocky soil stretched for miles, broken only by the occasional stand of cottonwood or the skeletal remains of someone's failed dream. Out here, the wind was constant, pulling at clothes and hair, carrying the smell of sage and dust. Rourke rode ahead, silent. Not unfriendly, just absent of small talk. Mara appreciated it. She didn't have the energy for pretending. They stopped once, near a creek bed that was more memory than water. Rourke dismounted and offered her a canteen. She drank, the water lukewarm but clean, and handed it back without comment. You know how to shoot? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. No. You'll learn. Can't live out here without knowing how to defend yourself. He recorked the canteen. Ranch gets visitors sometimes. Not all of them friendly. What kind of visitors? The kind looking for easy targets. He swung back into his saddle. But you won't be an easy target. Not anymore. They rode on. The ranch appeared near midday, rising out of the landscape like something half-born. A main house, weathered but solid, with a covered porch and shutters that had seen better days. A barn, leaning slightly but still standing. Fences that needed mending. A chicken coop, a well. It looked lonely, but it looked survivable. Rourke dismounted and started unloading the mule. House is open. Pick whichever room you want upstairs. I sleep down here. Mara slid off her horse, her legs shaking. Where do you want me to put my things? He glanced at her, then at the horse, then back. You don't have any things. Right. There's clothes in the trunk upstairs. Belong to, He stopped. They'll fit well enough. Use what you need. His first wife, Mara realized. The one he'd supposedly killed. She climbed the porch steps, each board creaking under her weight, and pushed open the front door. The inside was sparse but clean. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, stairs leading up to the second floor. Mara climbed them slowly, her hand on the rail, and found 3 rooms. One clearly Rourke's, door open, bed unmade, clothes hung on pegs. The other 2 empty except for dust and the ghosts of whoever had lived here before. She chose the one farthest from his. The trunk sat at the foot of the bed, heavy and scarred with age. Mara opened it and found dresses, all plain, all practical. She pulled one out, dark gray, long sleeves, buttons up the front, and held it against herself. It fit. She changed quickly, folding her ruined blue dress and tucking it into the bottom of the trunk. Maybe she'd burn it later. Maybe she'd keep it as a reminder. Downstairs, Rourke had started a fire in the stove and was setting a pot of coffee to boil. He looked up when she entered, his gaze flicking over the new dress, then away. Fits, he said. Yes. Good. He poured 2 cups of coffee, black and bitter, and handed her one. We'll ride into town next week. Make it official. Get the marriage recorded, file the paperwork. Until then, you're here as hired help. Anyone asks, that's the story. Mara sipped the coffee. It burned all the way down. What about the ring? Rourke set his cup down and pulled a small metal file from a drawer. Give me your hand. She hesitated, then extended her left hand. The ring had swollen the flesh around it, turning the skin an angry red. Rourke took her hand carefully, his grip firm but not rough, and positioned the file against the metal. This is going to hurt, he said. I know. He started filing, slow, steady strokes. The metal resisted at first, then began to give. Mara bit the inside of her cheek, tasting blood, but didn't make a sound. It took 20 minutes. When the ring finally split, Rourke pried it open and slid it off her finger. The skin beneath was raw, infected, weeping. I'll get bandages, he said, dropping the ruined ring onto the table. Mara stared at it. That small circle of tarnished silver, the last piece of Thomas she carried. Burn it, she said. Rourke paused in the doorway, looking back. Burn it, Mara repeated. I don't want it. He picked up the ring, walked to the stove, and tossed it into the fire. The metal glowed red, then white, then melted into nothing. Mara watched it disappear, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something close to free. The days fell into a rhythm. Mara woke before dawn and started the fire. She cooked breakfast, eggs, bacon, bread when they had it, and left Rourke's plate on the table. He ate in silence, then headed out to work the land. She cleaned, mended fences, fed the chickens, hauled water from the well. It was hard work, harder than anything she'd done in Sundrift, but it was honest. And nobody hit her. Rourke kept his distance. He spoke only when necessary, offered no kindness but no cruelty either. He was a presence, solid and unmoving, like the house itself. At night, they ate dinner across from each other at the small table. Sometimes he'd comment on the food, good, or need salt, and she'd nod. Sometimes they sat in complete silence, the only sound the crackling fire and the wind outside. It should have been unbearable, but Mara found it almost peaceful. On the 4th day, Rourke taught her to shoot. He set up bottles on the fence posts and handed her an old revolver, showing her how to load it, how to aim, how to breathe. Don't close your eyes, he said when she pulled the trigger the first time and missed by a mile. Keep them open. Trust yourself. She tried again, missed again. You're flinching before the shot. Stop thinking about the noise. Think about the target. 3rd time, she hit the fence post. Not the bottle, but close. Better, Rourke said. Keep practicing. She did. Every evening after chores, she spent an hour shooting at bottles. Her aim improved slowly, grudgingly, but it improved. Rourke watched sometimes from the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one evening, lowering the gun. "Doing what?" "Teaching me, helping me." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Because nobody taught me when I needed it, and I spent years learning the hard way." He pushed off the porch rail. "Figured I'd save you the trouble." It wasn't an answer. Not really. But it was something. About that. The visit came on the 8th day. Mara was hanging laundry when she heard the horses. 3 riders coming up the road at an easy pace. She froze, clothespins in hand, and watched them approach. Rourke emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but pointed down. The lead rider was a man in his 50s, gray-haired and solid, wearing a badge. Sheriff, Mara guessed. The other 2 were younger, deputies maybe, both armed. "Rourke," the sheriff called, reining in his horse. "Heard you took yourself a wife." News travels fast. It does when the woman's got a reputation. The sheriff's eyes found Mara. "That her?" "That's her." "She got a name?" "Mara," Rourke said before she could answer. "Mara Rourke now." The sheriff dismounted, slow and deliberate. "Mind if I have a word with her? Alone?" "I do mind, actually." "Rourke, I'm not here to cause trouble. Just want to make sure the lady's here of her own free will." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You understand." Mara stepped forward before Rourke could argue. "I'm here because I want to be," she said, her voice steady. "Nobody forced me." The sheriff looked her over, taking in the dress, the bandaged hand, the way she stood with her shoulders back despite everything. "That's so." "Yes." "You know what people say about him?" The sheriff jerked his chin toward Rourke. "About what happened to his first wife." "I know." "And you're not concerned?" Mara met his gaze. "I'm more concerned about what happens to women who don't have protection out here. I've seen it firsthand." Something shifted in the sheriff's expression. Not respect exactly, but recognition. "Fair enough." He remounted his horse. "Just remember, Mrs. Rourke, you ever need help, you come find me, day or night. I will." But they both knew she wouldn't. The riders left, kicking up dust. Mara watched them go, her heart still pounding. "You didn't have to do that," Rourke said quietly. "Do what?" "Defend me." Mara turned to look at him. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending myself." He almost smiled. Almost. They rode into town the following week to make it official. The clerk at the territorial office was a nervous man with ink-stained fingers who kept glancing at Mara like she might hex him if he made eye contact too long. He processed the paperwork quickly, barely looking at either of them, and handed Rourke the certificate with shaking hands. "Congratulations," he mumbled. Outside, Mara stared at the paper. Calder Rourke and Mara Vale, lawfully wed. "How do you feel?" Rourke asked. "Like I signed my life away." "You did." He folded the certificate and tucked it into his coat. "But at least now it's to someone who won't hurt you." It was the closest he'd come to a promise. They stopped at the general store on the way out of town. Mara needed fabric for mending, and Rourke wanted ammunition. Inside, people stared, whispered. A woman clutched her child closer when Mara passed. At the counter, the shopkeeper hesitated before taking Rourke's money. "Heard you got married," he said carefully. "You heard right. That woman, she really cursed, or is it just talk?" Rourke leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Does it matter?" The shopkeeper paled and quickly handed over the change. Outside, Mara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "They'll always talk," Rourke said, mounting his horse. "Best to stop listening." Easier said than done. That night, back at the ranch, Mara sat on the porch and watched the stars. They were brighter out here, away from town, scattered across the sky like thrown dice. Rourke joined her after a while, settling into the rocking chair with a creak of wood. "You regret it yet?" he asked. "No. Give it time." They sat in silence. The wind moved through the grass, a sound like whispered secrets. "Did you really kill your wife?" Mara asked suddenly. Rourke didn't flinch. "No, she died in childbirth. Baby didn't make it either." His voice was flat, emotionless. "But people needed someone to blame, and I was convenient." I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He rocked slowly. What about you? Did you kill your husband? No. Mara pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. Fever killed him, but I didn't mourn him. That's not the same as killing him, isn't it? Rourke considered this. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on who's judging. Another silence, comfortable in its way. Thank you, Mara said quietly, for giving me a chance. Don't thank me yet, Rourke replied. We've got a long road ahead. But for the first time in years, Mara thought she might actually survive it, and that was more than she'd ever hoped for in Sundrift. The first month passed like water over stone, slow, relentless, wearing away at the sharp edges of who they'd been before. Mara learned the rhythms of the ranch the way you learn a new language, stumbling at first, then finding fluency in the repetition. Wake before sunrise. Start the fire, boil coffee so strong it could strip paint, fry whatever meat they had, eggs when the hens were generous. Leave Rourke's plate on the table and take hers to the porch, where she could watch the land wake up under a sky that never seemed to stop changing colors. Rourke would eat quickly, mechanically, like fuel going into a machine. Then he'd be gone, mending fence lines, checking on the cattle, hauling feed, fixing whatever had broken overnight. The ranch demanded constant attention, constant labor, and he gave it without complaint. Mara's days filled with different work, but no less demanding. Hauling water from the well until her shoulders screamed, scrubbing floors that would just get dirty again, beating rugs that released clouds of dust older than her marriage, feeding chickens that pecked at her hands like tiny feathered tyrants, learning which tools did what, where things were kept, how to coax the temperamental stove into cooperation. Some days she wanted to scream from the monotony of it. Other days the monotony felt like salvation. Nobody hit her here. Nobody spat at her feet or called her cursed. The work was hard, yes, but it was clean, honest. And at the end of each day, when her muscles ached and her hands were raw, she could sit on that porch and know she'd earned her place. That mattered more than she'd expected. Rourke kept his distance, maintaining the careful boundary they'd established. Separate rooms, separate lives that happened to occupy the same space. He didn't ask about her past beyond what she'd already told him, and she returned the favor. Some mornings they'd go hours without speaking. Other times he'd mention something practical. The fence on the north pasture needs posts replaced, or we're low on flour. And she'd nod, filing the information away. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't cruelty either. It was something in between, something Mara didn't have a name for yet. The shooting practice continued every evening. Mara's aim improved week by week, her hands learning to steady themselves, her eye learning to track the target without flinching. The bottles shattered more often now, glass exploding in small victories that made her feel less helpless than she had in years. Better, Rourke said one evening after she'd hit 3 in a row. You're thinking less, reacting more. That's good. How long did it take you to get good at this? Mara asked, reloading. Too long. And I had to learn while people were shooting back. He leaned against the fence post, arms crossed. You've got the luxury of practice. Use it. She raised the gun again, sighted down the barrel, squeezed the trigger. The bottle exploded. What happens if someone does come here? She asked. Someone dangerous, I mean. You shoot them. Just like that? Just like that. His voice held no hesitation. Out here, you don't get second chances. Someone means you harm, you end it before they do. Mara lowered the gun, feeling its weight in her hands. I've never killed anyone. Hope you never have to. Rourke pushed off the fence. But if it comes down to them or you, don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you buried. That night, Mara lay in her bed upstairs and thought about what it would feel like to pull a trigger with a person on the other end instead of a bottle. The weight of it. The finality. She'd seen death up close, Thomas dying in their bed, fever turning him into something unrecognizable. But watching someone die and causing it were different things entirely. She hoped Rourke was right, that she'd never have to find out. Winter started creeping in during the second month, bringing cold that cut through clothes and turned morning chores into small acts of suffering. Mara's hands cracked and bled from the constant exposure. She wrapped them in cloth, kept working, tried not to think about how much worse it would get. Rourke noticed. He didn't say anything, but one evening he left a tin of salve on the kitchen table. No note, no explanation, just the salve. Mara used it, and her hand stopped bleeding. Small gestures like that started appearing. A warmer coat hung on her peg by the door. Extra firewood stacked near her room. A pair of work gloves that fit better than the ones she'd been using. Rourke never mentioned them, never asked for thanks, never made a production out of basic consideration. It was the strangest kindness Mara had ever experienced. She tried to return it in the ways she could. His shirts got mended more carefully. His coffee got stronger. She started baking bread twice a week instead of once, and made extra so he could take some with him when he rode out to check the far pastures. They were building something, she realized. Not affection, exactly, not friendship, but a kind of mutual respect born from shared survival. It was more than she'd had with Thomas in 6 years of marriage. The trouble started in the 3rd month, right when Mara was beginning to think maybe this arrangement could actually work. She was hanging laundry when the rider appeared, a single man on a gray horse, moving fast across the open ground toward the ranch. Mara dropped the shirt she was holding and ran for the house, grabbing the rifle Rourke kept loaded by the door. By the time she reached the porch, Rourke was already there, his own rifle in hand, watching the approaching rider with narrowed eyes. "You know him?" Mara asked. "Yeah." Rourke's jaw tightened. "His name's Harlow, works for Ezek Crane." The name meant nothing to Mara, but the way Rourke said it, flat, careful, told her everything she needed to know. The rider pulled up short of the porch, his horse dancing nervously. Up close, Mara could see he was young, maybe 20, with a thin face and eyes that kept moving, never settling on one thing for long. "Rourke," Harlow said, not bothering with pleasantries, "Mr. Crane wants to talk." "About what?" "Your land. Says he's made you a fair offer before and you turned him down. He's willing to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate. The land's not for sale." Harlow's gaze slid to Mara, lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "Heard you got yourself a wife. That true?" "None of your business." "Mr. Crane thinks it might be his business. See, he's been waiting for you to die or leave, but if you've got a wife, that complicates things." Harlow smiled, showing yellow teeth. "He wanted me to remind you that accidents happen out here, real easy, especially to women who don't know how to protect themselves." Rourke moved so fast Mara almost didn't see it. One moment he was standing on the porch, the next he had Harlow by the collar, dragging him halfway off his horse. "You tell Crane if he wants to threaten me, he can do it himself," Rourke said, his voice deadly quiet. "And if I hear about anyone coming near my wife, I'll kill him myself. Slow. You understand?" Harlow's face had gone pale. "I'm just delivering a message." "Message delivered." Rourke shoved him back into the saddle. "Now get off my land before I change my mind about letting you leave." Harlow didn't need to be told twice. He wheeled his horse around and took off at a gallop, dust rising in his wake. Mara watched him go, her heart hammering. "Who's Ezek Crane?" Rourke stood there for a long moment, staring after the rider. "Someone I should have killed a long time ago." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." He turned toward the barn. "Come on, we've got work to do." But Mara wasn't letting it go. She followed him into the barn, where he started checking the horses with quick, practiced movements. "If someone's threatening us, I have a right to know why," she said. "Us." Rourke glanced at her. "Interesting choice of words." "You made me your wife. Legal or not, that makes this my problem too." He finished checking the mare's hooves and straightened, facing her. "Ezek Crane owns most of the land north of here. He's been buying up properties for years, sometimes legally, sometimes not. He wanted this ranch before I ever got here, but the previous owner wouldn't sell. Then the owner died, and I bought it at auction. And Crane didn't like that. Crane doesn't like anything he can't control." Rourke moved to the next stall. "He's made offers. I've refused. He's made threats. I've ignored them. Now he's getting creative." "Creative how?" "You heard Harlow. Accidents happen. Fires, poisoned wells, cattle driven off cliffs. And if that doesn't work, sometimes people just disappear." He looked at her directly. "That's who Ezek Crane is. That's what he does." Mara's stomach tightened. "Why didn't you tell me this before I agreed to come here? Would it have changed your answer?" She thought about Sundrift, about Vernon and Dalton and the woman who'd called her a witch whore, about sleeping under stable overhangs and going days without food. "No," she admitted. Then it didn't matter. Rourke closed the stall door. "But now you know. Crane's going to push harder. He always does when he senses weakness." I'm not weak. I didn't say you were. Something shifted in his expression. But Crane doesn't know that. All he sees is a woman he can use to get to me. Then we'll show him he's wrong. Rourke almost smiled. We will, but it won't be easy, and it won't be safe. You sure you're ready for that? Mara met his eyes. I've been not safe my whole life. At least here I know what I'm fighting. This time he did smile, brief as a flash of lightning. Fair enough. The threat started small. 3 days after Harlow's visit, Mara found 2 of their chickens dead in the coop, necks wrung. No predator had done it. The birds were just killed and left there. A message more than anything. A week later, part of the north fence was cut, and 6 head of cattle wandered off. They found 5 of them. The 6th was gone, likely stolen. The well water turned foul one morning, and Rourke had to spend half a day cleaning it out, finding a dead animal someone had thrown down there during the night. Each incident was small enough to maybe be coincidence. Put together, they formed a pattern. Rourke hired 2 ranch hands, weathered men named Cobb and Jessup, who'd worked for him before and could be trusted to keep their mouths shut and their eyes open. They slept in the bunkhouse and took turns on night watch, rifles always close. We're going to lose money this way, Mara said one evening, watching Rourke count out wages for the hired men. We'll lose more if Crane runs us off. He folded the bills and tucked them into his pocket. This is the cost of staying. Is it worth it? Ask me again in 6 months. But Crane wasn't patient enough to wait 6 months. The fire came on a moonless night in early winter. Mara woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Cobb shouting. She threw on clothes and ran downstairs to find Rourke already outside, bucket in hand, running toward the barn where flames were climbing the walls like hungry hands. She grabbed another bucket, filled it at the well, and ran. The heat hit her first, a wall of it that made her eyes water and her lungs seize. Rourke was already inside, leading horses out one by one, their eyes rolling white with terror. Cobb and Jessup worked the well pump, filling buckets and throwing water on the spreading flames. The feed room, Rourke shouted. If the grain catches, we lose everything. Mara ran for the feed room, throwing water on the door frame, the walls, anywhere the fire was reaching. Smoke filled her lungs, thick and choking. Her eyes streamed, her hands blistered from the heat. But they kept working. All 4 of them, moving like parts of the same desperate machine, fighting the fire bucket by bucket, horse by horse, minute by minute. It took 2 hours to get it under control. By the time the last ember was doused, Mara was covered in soot and ash, her dress burned in places, her hands shaking from exhaustion. The barn was half destroyed. One wall collapsed, the roof sagging dangerously, but it was still standing. Rourke stood in front of it, breathing hard, his face black with smoke. Everyone all right? He asked. Cobb nodded, coughing. Jessup gave a thumbs up. Mara just stared at the wreckage. This was Crane, she said. Not a question. Yeah. Rourke's voice was rough from smoke and rage. This was Crane. What are we going to do? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something cold and final. We're going to rebuild, and then we're going to make him regret this. The next morning, Rourke rode into Sundrift alone. Mara wanted to go with him, but he refused. I need you here. Cobb and Jessup are good, but if something happens, they'll need help. You're the only one who can shoot worth a damn. So she stayed, standing guard while the hired men started clearing debris from the barn, her rifle heavy in her hands. Rourke returned near sundown, his face grim. What happened? Mara asked as he dismounted. Talked to the sheriff, told him about the fire, the threats, all of it. He handed his horse's reins to Cobb. He said without proof, there's nothing he can do. Even though everyone knows it's Crane, especially because everyone knows it's Crane. The sheriff's scared of him. Most people are. Rourke headed for the house. We're on our own. Inside, Mara poured him coffee and sat across from him at the table. His hands were scraped raw from pulling timber, his knuckles bleeding. Let me see, she said. He hesitated, then extended his hands. Mara fetched the salve he'd given her weeks ago and worked it into his torn skin, careful around the worst cuts. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Stay. Fight. This isn't your war. Mara looked up from his hands. You made it my war when you married me. That was the deal, remember? Protection. Partnership. Partnership implies equality. This isn't equal. I'm putting you in danger. I've been in danger since the day I was born, Mara said. At least here I get to fight back. Rourke studied her face for a long moment. You've changed. So have you. How do you figure? You smile sometimes now. Not often, but sometimes. She finished with the salve and set it aside. And you don't flinch when I get close. Neither do you. It was true. Somewhere in the last 3 months, they'd stopped moving around each other like strangers in a dangerous dance. The distance was still there, the boundaries still clear, but the fear had gone. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the house settle and thought about fire, about how quickly things could burn, how fragile safety really was, even out here, even with walls and rifles and hired men standing watch. Downstairs, she heard Rourke moving around. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and found him sitting at the table in the dark, a bottle of whiskey in front of him. Can't sleep either? She asked. Never could, after something like this. He poured a second glass without asking and slid it across to her. Figured you might need it. Mara sat and drank. The whiskey burned, but it was a clean burn, clarifying. How long do you think he'll keep this up? Crane? Until we leave or die. Those are the only outcomes he understands. Then we make sure there's a third option, which is he leaves or dies. Rourke raised his glass in a mock toast. I'll drink to that. They sat in the darkness, passing the bottle between them, not talking much but not needing to. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I killed a man once, Rourke said suddenly. Mara waited. Not the ones people talk about. Those are lies. But there was one. In Abilene, years back. He came at me with a knife in a card game. Said I'd cheated. I hadn't, but it didn't matter to him. He stared at the amber liquid in his glass. I shot him, center mass. He was dead before he hit the floor. Did you regret it? No, he would have killed me if I hadn't acted. Rourke took another drink. But I remember his face. Every detail. Sometimes I still see it when I close my eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because if this thing with Crane goes the way I think it will, you might have to kill someone too, and I want you to know what that means, what it costs. He met her eyes. It's not like shooting bottles. I know. Do you? Mara thought about Thomas, about the night she'd lain awake next to him, praying for him to stop breathing, about the relief she'd felt when he finally did. Yeah, she said, I think I do. The weeks that followed were tense, waiting for the next attack that never came. It was worse than the actual incidents, the not knowing, the constant vigilance, the way every sound at night could be a threat. But the ranch work continued. It had to. The cattle still needed tending. The barns still needed rebuilding. Winter was coming hard and fast, and they had to be ready. Mara worked alongside the men now, hauling timber for the new barn wall, learning how to swing a hammer properly, developing calluses on top of her calluses. Cobb taught her how to rope a steer. Jessup showed her how to tell when a cow was sick just by looking at it. She was becoming something she'd never been before, useful, capable, someone who could hold her own. Rourke noticed. You're getting stronger, he said one afternoon, watching her lift a beam that would have been impossible for her a month ago. Had a good teacher. I didn't teach you that. No, you taught me to survive. I figured out the rest myself. He nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. Good. The second attack came just before Christmas, though nobody was celebrating anything that year. Mara was in the chicken coop when she heard the gunshot. She ran for the house, her heart in her throat, and found Jessup on the ground near the well, blood spreading across his shoulder. Rourke and Cobb were returning fire toward the tree line, where muzzle flashes showed at least 3 shooters. Get inside, Rourke shouted when he saw her, but Mara didn't get inside. She dropped behind the water trough, raised her rifle, and started shooting back. The bottles had prepared her for the kick of the gun, the noise, the focus required. What they hadn't prepared her for was the rush, the pure crystalline clarity that came from fighting for your life. She aimed, fired, aimed again, fired again. One of the muzzle flashes stopped. Nice shot, Cobb yelled. The shooters retreated, disappearing into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. The silence that followed was deafening. Rourke ran to Jessup, kneeling beside him. How bad? Went clean through, Jessup gasped, his face pale. I'll live. Mara helped them get him inside, where she cleaned and bandaged the wound with hands that didn't shake until afterward. Only when Jessup was settled and the bleeding stopped did she allow herself to feel the fear. She went outside, walked to the far side of the porch, and vomited. Rourke found her there, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. First time's always the hardest, he said. I shot someone. You defended your home. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him. Because right now it feels the same. Give it time. The feeling doesn't go away, but it gets quieter. He handed her his canteen. You did good today. Really good. Mara rinsed her mouth and handed it back. One of them's out there bleeding because of me. And you're in here breathing because of you. I'll take that trade every time. That night, after Jessup was asleep and Cobb was on watch, Rourke and Mara sat at the kitchen table again. This isn't going to stop, Mara said. No. So what do we do? Rourke was quiet for a long time. Then, we go after him first. After Crane? He's waiting for us to run or break. We do neither. We take the fight to him. Rourke's eyes were hard. But I need to know you're all in, because once we start down this road, there's no going back. Mara thought about the fire, about Jessup bleeding, about the person she'd shot today, whose face she'd never seen but whose death she might have caused. She thought about Sundrift, about being prey, about running and hiding and surviving on scraps. And she thought about this ranch, this strange partnership, this life she'd built from nothing. I'm all in, she said. Rourke extended his hand across the table. Not a handshake exactly, something more binding than that. Mara took it, and whatever uneasy truce they'd been living under transformed into something else. Something harder. Something that felt dangerously close to trust. They spent 2 days planning, mapping out Crane's territory on paper spread across the kitchen table, marking the places where his men were known to gather, where his cattle grazed, where he kept his money and his secrets. Rourke had more information than Mara expected. He knew the layout of Crane's main ranch, the rotation of his guards, the names of the men who'd be loyal to the death, and the ones who worked for pay and nothing else. You've been watching him, Mara said, tracing the lines he'd drawn showing fence boundaries and water access. For 2 years, ever since the first threat. Rourke tapped a spot on the map marked with an X. This is his weak point. The North Pasture runs right up against federal land. No witnesses, no jurisdiction complications. If we're going to hit him, that's where we do it. Hit him how? Cattle. He's got close to 300 head grazing up there this time of year. We scatter them, maybe drive some onto federal land where he can't legally retrieve them without paperwork that'll take weeks. It won't ruin him, but it'll hurt. And more importantly, it'll show him we're not afraid. Mara studied the map, seeing the risks immediately. His men will be patrolling. They will, which is why we go at night during the new moon, and we bring Cobb. What about Jessup? He stays here, guards the ranch. Someone needs to be here in case this is what Crane's waiting for, us leaving the place vulnerable. Rourke folded the map carefully. We leave tomorrow night. That gives us today to prepare. The preparation was meticulous. They checked every rifle, loaded extra ammunition, packed supplies for 2 days in the saddle. Rourke went over the plan 3 times, making sure everyone understood their role, where to meet if things went wrong, when to cut and run. If shooting starts, you don't play hero, he told Mara. You get out, get back here, and you live. Understand? Same goes for you. I'm serious. So am I. Mara met his eyes. We're partners now. You said it yourself. That means nobody gets left behind. Rourke looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine, but you follow my lead out there. I've done this before. You haven't. What exactly have you done before? His smile was grim. Things I'm not proud of. Things that kept me alive. They left an hour after sunset the next day, riding north under a sky so black the stars looked like holes punched in velvet. The temperature had dropped hard, breath misting in front of their faces, frost already forming on the grass. Mara wore every layer she owned and still felt the cold working through to her bones. But the discomfort sharpened her focus, kept her alert as they navigated by starlight and Rourke's memory of the land. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were hoofbeats muffled by frozen ground and the creak of leather saddles. Cobb rode behind them, his rifle across his lap, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness. They reached the federal land boundary just before midnight and dismounted, tying the horses in a stand of cottonwoods where they'd be hidden from casual observation. "From here we walk," Rourke said quietly. "Stay low. Watch where you step. Cattle spook easy at night, and if they stampede wrong, we'll be the ones getting trampled." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, Rourke leading, Mara in the middle, Cobb bringing up the rear. The land rose and fell in gentle swells, deceptive in the dark, easy to trip on if you weren't careful. Mara's heart hammered so hard she was sure it would give them away. Every shadow looked like a rider, every sound like approaching danger. Her hands were slick with sweat inside her gloves, despite the cold. Then she saw them, dark shapes against darker ground. The cattle bedded down for the night in loose clusters across the pasture. Hundreds of them, just like Rourke had said. "There," Rourke whispered, pointing to a ridge about 200 yards east. "Guard post. See the firelight?" Mara squinted and caught it. A small orange glow, mostly hidden behind rocks, but visible if you knew where to look. "One man, maybe two," Rourke continued. "They'll have rifles. Soon as the cattle start moving, they'll know something's wrong. So we need to move fast. Faster than fast." He looked at Cobb. "You take the west side, start pushing them north toward the federal boundary. Mara, you're with me on the east. We get them running, keep them running, don't stop until they're scattered across 3 counties." Cobb nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Rourke turned to Mara. "You ready?" She wasn't, but she said yes. They split up, circling around the herd from opposite sides. Mara's job was simple. Make noise, wave her arms, get the cattle moving. The execution was harder. She'd never worked cattle in daylight, let alone in pitch darkness on someone else's land while armed men watched for intruders. She waited for Rourke's signal, a low whistle that sounded almost like wind through grass. Then she moved. She started yelling, waving her coat, kicking at the ground. The nearest cattle lurched to their feet, confused and alarmed. More joined them. Then more. Within seconds, the whole herd was up and moving, a dark tide of muscle and panic flowing north. Gunshots cracked from the ridge. "Go, go, go, go!" Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. Mara ran alongside the stampede, keeping them moving, her lungs burning from cold air and exertion. More gunshots. Closer now. Something buzzed past her ear. A bullet, she realized with sick clarity. Someone was shooting at her. She dropped low, still moving, still pushing the cattle. They were panicking now, running blind, exactly what they needed. The sound was incredible. Thousands of pounds of beef thundering across frozen ground, bellowing and crashing into each other. Then she saw the riders coming from the south, 4 of them, charging hard to cut off the stampede. "Rourke!" she screamed. He was already moving, his rifle up, firing toward the riders. One went down, horse and man tumbling. The others veered off, trying to flank around. "The boundary!" Rourke shouted. "Get them across!" Mara pushed harder, her legs screaming, her throat raw. The cattle were strung out now, some still running, others breaking off in confusion. But enough were heading north, toward the invisible line that separated Crane's land from federal territory. More gunshots. A bullet kicked up dirt at her feet. She threw herself sideways, landed hard, rolled, came up running. Cobb appeared out of nowhere, firing methodically at the pursuing riders. "Get out of here!" he yelled at Mara. "We got this!" But Mara kept moving, kept pushing, because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant fear, and fear meant dying. The cattle hit the boundary and kept going, spreading out across federal land like water breaking through a dam. Behind them, the riders had pulled up, not willing to cross onto government territory where they'd lose any legal protection. Rourke grabbed Mara's arm. "Move, now!" They ran back toward the trees where they'd left the horses, Cobb covering their retreat with precise rifle fire that kept the riders at a distance. Mara's lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. Her legs barely worked. But she ran anyway, because the alternative was unthinkable. They reached the horses and mounted in one fluid motion born of pure adrenaline. Then they were riding hard to the south, low over their horses' necks, the wind screaming in their ears. Nobody pursued. Crane's men knew better than to chase onto land where they had no authority, no backup, no advantage. They rode for 2 hours before Rourke finally slowed, letting the horses catch their breath. Mara slumped in her saddle, shaking from exhaustion and delayed shock. "Everyone all right?" Rourke asked. "I'm good," Cobb said. Mara managed a nod. "Then we did it." Rourke's teeth flashed in the darkness. "We just cost Ezek Crane about $40,000 in scattered cattle and federal recovery fees." "He's going to come for us," Mara said. Her voice sounded distant, not quite her own. "Yeah, he is." Rourke urged his horse forward again, slower now. "But now he knows we're not easy prey. That changes things." They reached the ranch as dawn broke, exhausted and filthy and alive. Jessup met them at the door, rifle in hand, relief evident on his face. "Heard shots in the distance. Thought maybe—" "We're fine," Rourke said, dismounting stiffly. "Any trouble here?" "Quiet as a graveyard." "Good. Keep it that way. Next few days are going to be rough." Mara stumbled inside, barely making it to a chair before her legs gave out. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't hold the cup of coffee Jessup poured for her. Rourke sat across from her, looking almost as wrecked as she felt. "You did good out there. I got shot at. And you didn't freeze. That's what matters." He drained his own coffee in one long swallow. "Get some rest. We're going to need it." But rest didn't come easy. Mara lay in her bed as morning light filled the room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the night. The gunshots, the stampede, the bullet that had come so close she'd felt its passage. She'd almost died. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm, alive in a way she'd never experienced before. Like every color was brighter, every sound clearer, every breath more intentional. Was this what Rourke meant about things that kept him alive? This sharp-edged clarity that came from dancing with death and walking away? She finally slept around noon, dropping into unconsciousness like falling off a cliff. When she woke, the house was dark and someone was pounding on the door. Mara grabbed her rifle and ran downstairs to find Rourke already there, gun in hand, peering through a gap in the shutters. "Who is it?" she whispered. "Don't know. Single rider. Unarmed, looks like. Could be a trick." "Could be." But Rourke opened the door anyway, keeping his rifle ready. The man on the porch was older, maybe 60, wearing a suit too fine for ranch country. His horse stood behind him, flanks heaving like it had been ridden hard. "Calder Rourke?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Edmund Price. I'm a lawyer from Cheyenne. I represent Ezek Crane." He saw their weapons and raised his hands slowly. "I'm here to deliver a message, nothing more. May I?" Rourke considered, then lowered his rifle slightly. "Talk." Price reached into his coat, carefully, clearly aware that sudden movements would get him shot, and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Crane wishes to extend an invitation. He'd like to meet with you tomorrow, noon, at his ranch, to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "That's between you and Mr. Crane. I'm just the messenger." Price held out the envelope. "He's offering a temporary truce for the meeting. You have his word that no harm will come to you on his property." "His word means nothing." "Perhaps. But he's offering it nonetheless." Price's eyes were shrewd, taking in the shabby ranch, the tension in Rourke's shoulders, the way Mara stood with her rifle like she knew how to use it. "You cost him a significant amount of money last night. He's willing to negotiate rather than escalate. I'd call that progress." Rourke took the envelope without opening it. "Tell Crane I'll think about it. He needs an answer by sunrise." "Then he'll have one by sunrise?" Price nodded and mounted his horse. "For what it's worth, Mr. Rourke, I think you should take the meeting. Mr. Crane can be reasonable when he wants to be, and unreasonable when he doesn't." He tipped his hat to Mara. "Ma'am." Then he rode off into the gathering darkness. Rourke closed the door and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of expensive paper with a handwritten note. "You've made your point. Now let's talk like civilized men before this gets any uglier. Come alone, come armed if it makes you feel better. But come. We can end this, or we can finish it. Your choice." It was signed with a flourish. E. Crane. "It's a trap," Mara said. "Probably." "So you're not going?" Rourke set the note on the table. "I have to. If there's even a chance of ending this without more bloodshed, I have to take it. He'll kill you the moment you set foot on his land. Maybe. Or maybe he really does want to negotiate." Rourke met her eyes. "I've fought enough wars to know when to recognize a ceasefire. even a temporary one. And right now we need time to recover, regroup, prepare for whatever comes next. Then I'm going with you. No. Yes. Mara, you said we're partners. You said nobody gets left behind. She stood her ground. You're not walking into that alone. If it's a trap and we both go, we both die. Someone needs to survive to keep this place running. Then let Cobb and Jessup keep it running. They know the work as well as we do. Mara's voice hardened. You go, I go. That's not negotiable. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Rourke broke the silence. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. You married me for it. He almost laughed. Fine, we'd both go. But you stay behind me. You don't speak unless spoken to. And if shooting starts, you run. Deal? No deal on the running part. Everything else, fine. You're going to get us both killed. Probably, but at least we'll go out fighting. This time Rourke did laugh, short and sharp. When did you get so bloodthirsty? When I realized I had something worth fighting for. The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than Mara had intended. Rourke's expression shifted, something complicated passing behind his eyes. Get some rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. They rode out at mid-morning, leaving Cobb and Jessup armed and watchful. The hired men hadn't liked the plan, had argued against it with the kind of vehemence that came from genuine concern, but Rourke had been firm. If we're not back by sunset, assume the worst, he'd told them. Pack what you can, burn the rest, and get out. Don't try to avenge us. Just survive. Like hell, Cobb had muttered, but he'd nodded. The ride to Crane's ranch took 3 hours. The land changed as they traveled north, becoming greener, more fertile, clearly better maintained. Crane's cattle dotted the hillsides, fat and healthy. His fences were straight and strong, his water access abundant. It was everything their ranch wasn't, and Mara understood suddenly why he wanted their land. Not because he needed it, but because he couldn't stand the idea of anyone else having something he didn't control. Men like that didn't negotiate. They took. The main house appeared over a rise, a sprawling structure that looked more like something from back east than frontier territory. 2 stories, painted white, with columns and a wide porch and windows that probably cost more than Mara had earned in her entire life. Guards stood at intervals along the fence line, all armed, all watching. Still time to turn back, Rourke said. No, there isn't. They rode up to the main gate where 2 men stopped them. Rourke? One asked. That's right. You're expected. But she's not. The guard nodded at Mara. She's my wife. Where I go, she goes. The guards exchanged glances. Wait here. One disappeared toward the house. 5 minutes later, he returned with another man, tall, silver-haired, wearing clothes that probably cost more than a good horse. Even from a distance, Mara could feel the authority radiating from him. Ezek Crane. He approached the gate with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had reason to fear anything. Up close, his face was handsome in a weathered way, his eyes sharp and calculating. Calder Rourke, he said, his voice smooth. I'd heard you'd gotten yourself a wife. Didn't expect you to bring her to our meeting. I don't go anywhere without her anymore. Crane's gaze shifted to Mara, assessing. Brave or foolish, can't decide which. What's your name, girl? Mara Rourke. She said it clearly, no hesitation. Rourke now, is it? Interesting. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, Mrs. Rourke, welcome to my home. I promise you'll leave it alive, assuming your husband has sense enough to listen to reason. Is that a threat? Rourke asked. An observation. Come inside. Let's talk like civilized people. The house interior was exactly what Mara expected. Expensive furniture, thick rugs, paintings on the walls that probably depicted Crane's various conquests and achievements. Everything calculated to intimidate, to remind visitors of the wealth and power they were dealing with. Crane led them to a study lined with books that looked like they'd never been read. He poured 3 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and handed them out. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. Rourke didn't drink, neither did Mara. Crane shrugged and downed his own. Suit yourselves. Let's get to business then. You cost me a lot of money last night. Scattered my herd, made me look weak in front of my men. That can't stand. You burned my barn, shot my hired man, poisoned my well. I'd say we're about even. Even? Crane laughed. Son, we're not even close to even, but I'm willing to let it go. Here's my offer. I'll buy your land for fair market value. You walk away, no hard feelings, everybody lives. And if I refuse, then this gets ugly. And I mean ugly in ways you can't imagine. Crane leaned back in his chair. I've got 20 men I can put in the field. You've got what, 2 hired hands? 3 counting your wife here, though I doubt she's much use in a real fight. Mara felt Rourke tense beside her. That land is mine, Rourke said. Legal and paid for. I'm not selling. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not this. Crane's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, a fatal one. Wouldn't be the first. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the ticking of an expensive clock on the mantel. Crane studied Rourke like a man trying to find a weakness, a crack to exploit. Finally, he smiled. You've got spine. I'll give you that. More than most. Tell you what, I'll give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, I take what I want the way I want. And Rourke, when I come for you, I won't be offering deals anymore. I'll be offering funerals. Is that all? Rourke stood. One more thing. Crane's eyes slid to Mara. Pretty wife you've got. Real pretty. Be a shame if something happened to her because of your stubbornness. Rourke moved so fast Mara barely saw it. 1 second he was standing calmly, the next he had Crane by the throat, slammed against the wall, his revolver pressed under Crane's chin. You threaten her again, Rourke said, his voice deadly quiet. And I'll kill you right here. Lawyers truce your men. All of it. None of it will matter. Understand? Crane's face had gone purple, but he managed a nod. Rourke released him and stepped back. We're leaving. Anyone tries to stop us, I start shooting. They walked out of that house with their backs exposed and their hearts hammering, expecting bullets any second. But Crane's men just watched, fingers on their triggers but not firing. Not yet. They mounted their horses and rode away at a careful pace, not running, not showing fear. It was only when they were a mile out that Mara let herself breathe. That went well, she said. Rourke barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. We've got 1 week before he comes with everything he has. We need to be ready. How do we get ready for 20 armed men? Very carefully, and with a lot of luck. But luck, Mara was learning, was just another word for desperation. They spent the week preparing for war. Rourke bought more ammunition, reinforced the windows with shutters that could stop bullets, stockpiled water and food in case of a siege. Cobb and Jessup worked from dawn to dusk, fortifying the ranch, creating defensive positions, mapping fields of fire. Mara learned to reload faster, shoot more accurately, think like someone who might have to kill to survive. Aim for center mass, Rourke told her during practice. Don't try for fancy headshots. You want to stop them, not impress them. She fired. The bottle exploded. Good, again. Fire, reload, over and over until her hands moved without thought, muscle memory taking over. At night, they planned. Every possible attack vector, every way Crane might come at them, every desperate gambit they could try if things went completely wrong. We can't win a straight fight, Rourke said on the 5th night. 20 against 4, we lose every time. Our only chance is to make it so costly that Crane decides we're not worth it. He's not going to decide that, Mara said. His pride won't let him. I know, which means we're probably going to die. Rourke looked at her across the table. I'm sorry. I brought you into this. It's my fault. Stop. I chose this. Nobody forced me. I should have let you stay in Sundrift, let you take your chances there. At least you might have survived. I wouldn't have. You know that. Mara reached across and took his hand, the first time she'd initiated contact like that. Whatever happens, I don't regret coming here. I don't regret meeting you. This life, short as it might be, is better than anything I had before. Rourke's fingers tightened around hers. We're not dead yet. Maybe we get lucky. Maybe. But neither of them believed it. The attack came on the 7th day just before dawn. Mara woke to gunfire and the smell of smoke. She grabbed her rifle and ran downstairs to find the ranch under assault from 3 sides simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit up the pre-dawn darkness. Bullets punched through shutters, splintered wood, shattered glass. Rourke was at the front window, firing methodically. Cobb held the east side, Jessup the west. Mara took the stairs, covering the upper floor, her heart in her throat. The attackers were professional, coordinated, clearly experienced. They moved in teams, one group providing covering fire while another advanced. Crane had brought his best men for this.
"They're trying to burn us out," Jessup shouted. "Fire on the barn!"
Mara ran to the window and saw it, flames climbing the rebuilt wall, catching fast despite the recent rain. If the barn went, the house was next. "I'm going out there," Rourke yelled. "You'll be killed the second you step outside." "Then I'll be killed." He was already moving. "Cover me." Mara ran to the front window and started firing as fast as she could reload, not aiming, just putting bullets in the general direction of the attackers to make them keep their heads down. Rourke burst through the door and sprinted for the well, moving low and fast. Bullets chewed up the ground around him. One caught his leg, sent him sprawling. He got up, kept moving, reached the well. Mara's rifle clicked empty. She fumbled for more ammunition, her hand shaking so hard she could barely load the rounds. Then Cobb was beside her. "Go help him. I've got this." She didn't argue. She ran down the stairs and out the door into hell. The world was noise and fire and chaos. Bullets whipped past her. Something tugged at her sleeve. She kept running, reached Rourke at the well where he was hauling up buckets with his wounded leg bleeding freely. "Get back inside," he shouted. "Shut up and throw." She grabbed a bucket and ran for the barn, dumping water on the flames. Another bucket. Another. They worked together, desperate and frantic, while bullets filled the air around them. Mara expected to die any second. Welcomed it, almost, because at least she'd die fighting beside someone who mattered. The sun rose, bringing light that showed just how bad it was. 15 attackers, maybe more, dug in behind cover with clear sight lines to the house. The barn was still burning despite their efforts. Jessup was down, clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. They were losing. Rourke grabbed Mara's arm. "Get inside, get the horses. When I say run, you run. You and Cobb, you get out of here." "No, that's an order, not a request. I don't take orders from you." Then the riders appeared on the southern ridge. At first, Mara thought it was more of Crane's men, flanking around to cut off any escape. But these riders weren't shooting. They just sat there on horseback, silhouetted against the rising sun. The firing slowed. Stopped. Everyone watching these new arrivals. One rider separated from the group and came forward at a walk. As he got closer, Mara recognized the silver star on his chest. The sheriff. He rode right into the middle of the firefight, his hands up, unarmed. "Azek!" he called out. "This stops now." From behind cover on the east side, a figure stood. Crane himself, rifle in hand. "This isn't your business, Sheriff. I'm making it my business. You're attacking a legally owned homestead. That's attempted murder, arson, and about 6 other charges I can think of." The sheriff gestured to the riders behind him. "I brought 12 deputies. You want to add killing a lawman to your list of crimes?" Crane's jaw worked. "He scattered my cattle, cost me thousands. Then sue him, take it to court. Don't burn him out like some kind of outlaw." The sheriff's voice hardened. "I've looked the other way on a lot of things, Ezek. But this I can't ignore. Stand down or I'll arrest every man here." For a long, terrible moment, Mara thought Crane would keep shooting, that he'd kill the sheriff just to make his point. Then Crane lowered his rifle. "This isn't over, Rourke," he called out. "Not even close." "Looking forward to it," Rourke shouted back. Crane and his men mounted up and rode off, leaving behind bullet casings and blood and the smell of smoke. The sheriff dismounted and walked to where Rourke stood, leaning heavily on Mara. "You hurt bad. I'll live. Thanks for showing up when you did." "Don't thank me. Thank your wife." The sheriff nodded at Mara. "She rode into town 3 nights ago, woke me up, told me what was coming. Said if I didn't do something, there'd be a massacre I'd have to answer for." Rourke stared at Mara. "You did what?" "You were asleep. I went into town." She said it simply. "Figured it couldn't hurt to try." "You could have been killed on the road alone at night." "Yeah, well, I wasn't." The sheriff smiled slightly. "You've got a keeper here, Rourke. Most women would have run the other direction." "She's full of surprises. I'll make sure Crane understands that if he tries this again, he'll be answering to territorial law. But watch your back. He's not the type to forgive being embarrassed." The sheriff remounted. "Get that leg looked at. And Mrs. Rourke, you ever decide you're tired of ranching, come see me. The territory could use more people with your particular brand of courage." They watched him ride away with his deputies, the sun fully up now, illuminating the damage. The barn was half destroyed again. Jessup needed a doctor. The house looked like it had been through a war, but they were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. Rourke turned to Mara, his face unreadable. "You rode into town alone, at night, without telling me." "Yes?" "That was reckless and stupid, and—" He stopped. "And probably saved all our lives." "Probably." He pulled her close, ignoring his bleeding leg, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart hammering against her chest. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Can't promise that." "I know." He pulled back, looked at her. "Thank you." It was the first time he'd said it and meant it. Mara nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in her throat. They had survived, but the war was far from over. The doctor came from town 2 hours after the sheriff left, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that shook slightly as he worked. He dug the bullet out of Rourke's leg while Mara held him down, feeling every muscle in his body go rigid against the pain. "Clean shot," the doctor said, threading a needle. "Missed the bone, missed the major vessels. You're lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky," Rourke growled through gritted teeth. "You're alive, that's lucky enough." The doctor started stitching, quick, efficient movements. "This is going to hurt." It did. Mara felt it in the way Rourke's hand crushed hers, the way his breathing went shallow and fast. But he didn't scream, didn't pass out, just endured it the way he seemed to endure everything. Jessup had it worse. The bullet had cracked 2 ribs and torn through muscle, leaving him pale and sweating on the kitchen table while the doctor worked. Cobb stood nearby, his own arm bandaged where a bullet had grazed him, watching with the kind of stillness that came from seeing too many friends hurt. "He needs rest," the doctor said when he finished. "Both of them do. No heavy lifting for at least 3 weeks." "3 weeks?" Rourke tried to sit up. "We don't have 3 weeks. The ranch will still be here when you heal." The doctor packed his instruments. "Push yourself now. You'll tear these stitches, get infected, maybe lose the leg. That what you want?" Rourke fell silent. The doctor turned to Mara. "You'll need to keep the wounds clean. Change the dressings twice a day. Watch for fever, swelling, red streaks. Any of that shows up, come get me immediately." "I will." "And get some rest yourself. You look half dead." Mara glanced at her reflection in the window glass. Face smudged with soot, hair wild, eyes hollowed out from exhaustion and fear. Half dead seemed generous. The doctor left with a promise to check on them in a few days, and Mara was left with 2 injured men, a damaged ranch, and the certainty that Crane wouldn't stay quiet for long. She started with the immediate problems. Got Jessup settled in the downstairs bedroom where he wouldn't have to navigate stairs. Made sure Rourke's leg was elevated, packed with ice from the cellar. Fed Cobb something hot because he looked like he'd collapse if someone didn't make him stop moving. Then she went outside and assessed the damage. The barn was a total loss this time. What had survived the first fire was gone now, just charred timber and ash. 3 chickens dead. 1 horse injured, though not seriously. Fences down in 2 places. Bullet holes everywhere, pockmarking the house like a disease. She stood in the middle of it all, feeling the weight settle on her shoulders. Rourke couldn't work. Jessup couldn't work. That left her and Cobb to keep everything running while also watching for Crane's next move. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt clarifying. She found Cobb in the tool shed, sorting through what could be salvaged. "We need a plan," she said. "I'm open to suggestions. We can't rebuild the barn, not yet. But we can patch the house, fix the critical fences, make sure the animals are secure." She counted on her fingers. Water first, then shelter, then defense. "In that order?" "In that order. Without water, everything else dies. Without shelter, winter kills us. Without defense, Crane finishes what he started." Cobb studied her for a moment. "When'd you get so practical?" "When I stopped having the luxury of being anything else." She grabbed a hammer. "Come on. Daylight's burning." They worked until her hands bled and her back screamed, patched the worst holes in the house, fixed the water pump that had taken a bullet through the mechanism, rounded up the scattered cattle that hadn't wandered too far, fed the animals, checked on the injured horse, reinforced what was left of the barn's foundation so it wouldn't collapse completely. Mara moved through it all in a kind of trance, her body operating on instinct while her mind stayed sharp and focused. She'd learned this rhythm over the months,
The way work could save you from thinking too much, from feeling too much, from acknowledging just how close to the edge you really were. When darkness fell, she made dinner from what they had: beans, dried meat, bread that was going stale but still edible. She brought Rourke his plate and found him trying to stand on his injured leg. "What are you doing?" "Trying to see if I can walk." The doctor said, "I know what he said." Rourke grimaced, putting weight on the leg. It held, barely. "But we don't have time for me to be useless." "You're not useless. You're healing." Mara set the plate down. "Sit, eat. Let me handle things for a few days." "You can't do it all yourself." "Watch me." He sat reluctantly. "You're as stubborn as I am." "I learned from the best." They ate in silence, the way they often did, but it felt different now. Like something had shifted in the space between them, some invisible boundary crossed during the chaos of the attack. Mara couldn't name it, didn't try, just felt it settling into her bones like cold weather or hunger, something that became part of the landscape. "Thank you," Rourke said quietly, "for riding into town, for getting the sheriff, for not running when you had the chance." "Where would I run to?" "Anywhere. Anywhere would have been safer than here." Mara met his eyes. "I'm done running, done being the person things happen to. If I'm going to die, it'll be fighting for something that matters. And this matters? A broken-down ranch in the middle of nowhere? It matters to me, and apparently it matters to you." She stood, collecting the empty plates. "That's enough." Rourke caught her wrist as she passed, his grip gentle despite the calluses. "Mara." She stopped. "If something happens to me, don't. Listen, if something happens, the ranch is yours. Legal papers are in the lockbox in my room. Everything's in both our names now. You'd own it outright. I don't want to own it without you." The words surprised them both. Rourke let go of her wrist slowly. "Yeah. Well, let's try to avoid that scenario." "Good plan." She went upstairs with her heart doing strange things in her chest, things she didn't have time to examine. Sleep came hard, haunted by gunfire and flames, but when it came, it was deep and dreamless. The next morning brought a visitor Mara hadn't expected. She was hauling water when she saw the wagon approaching, small, drawn by a single tired-looking mule, driven by a woman in a faded dress and bonnet. Mara grabbed her rifle and waited. The woman pulled up outside the fence and climbed down carefully, like her bones hurt. Up close, she looked maybe 50, weathered by hard living, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Mrs. Rourke?" she called. "That's right. My name's Sarah Hobbs. I live about 8 miles east, over the ridge. Heard about the attack. Brought some things." She gestured to the wagon bed, which was loaded with supplies, food, bandages, even a few chickens. Mara lowered the rifle. "Why?" "Because Isaac Crane is a cancer on this territory, and I'm tired of watching good people get run off their land." Sarah's jaw set. "My husband stood up to him 5 years back. They found him in a ravine with a broken neck. Sheriff called it an accident." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart, and take the help when it's offered." Sarah started unloading. "I've got 3 sons, all grown, all good with rifles. They'll come by twice a week to help with the heavy work until your men are back on their feet." "We can't pay." "Didn't ask for pay. Asked for someone to finally stand up to that bastard and not back down." She handed Mara a sack of flour. "You and your husband did that. Least I can do is help you survive it." Over the next hour, 3 more wagons arrived. Neighbors Mara hadn't known existed, people scratching out lives on equally hard land, all bringing what they could spare. Food, tools, labor, solidarity. "Crane's made enemies," a grizzled rancher named Tom Winters explained. "But we're all too scared or too small to fight him alone. You two, though, you drew blood. You showed it's possible." "We barely survived," Mara said. "Surviving's more than most manage." Tom tipped his hat. "You need anything, you send word. We'll come." When they finally left, the ranch looked less like a battlefield and more like something that could be rebuilt. Mara stood in the yard, surrounded by donated supplies, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Rourke watched from the porch, his injured leg propped up. "Didn't see that coming." "Me neither. Guess we're not as alone as we thought." "Guess not." But hope was a dangerous thing out here. It made you careless,
Made you forget that people like Crane didn't quit just because they lost one round. The reminder came 3 days later. Mara was mending fence with Cobb when she saw the smoke on the northern horizon, thick and black, too much to be a campfire. They rode toward it and found the Hobbs homestead burning, the house and barn both engulfed, nothing salvageable. Sarah stood in the yard with her 3 sons, watching their lives turn to ash. Crane's men came this morning, she said, her voice empty. Said this is what happens to people who help his enemies. Said we're lucky they didn't burn us too. Mara's hands clenched into fists. Where are they now? Gone. Rode north, back toward Crane's land. Sarah finally looked at Mara. I'm sorry. I thought we could help. I didn't think he'd... This isn't your fault, isn't it? Sarah's laugh was bitter. We stood up, and this is what we got. Same thing that'll happen to anyone else who tries. No. Mara's voice came out harder than she intended. This is what happens when we fight back halfway. We hit him, he hits back harder, we defend, he escalates. It's a pattern, and it won't stop until someone breaks it. How do you break it? Mara looked at the burning house, at the family who'd lost everything for trying to do the right thing, and felt something cold and final settle in her chest. By ending it, she said. When they got back to the ranch, Mara found Rourke attempting to walk without his cane, sweating through his shirt from the effort. Hobbs' place is gone, she said. Crane burned them out for helping us. Rourke's jaw tightened. Anyone hurt? No. But they lost everything. She dropped into a chair. This has to stop. I know? No, you don't understand. It has to stop. Not eventually, not after we rebuild, not when we're stronger. Now. Because every day we wait, he hurts someone else, and I won't have that on my conscience. What are you suggesting? Mara met his eyes. I'm suggesting we go after Crane directly. Not his cattle, not his men. Him. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way this ends without everyone we care about getting destroyed in the crossfire. She leaned forward. You said it yourself. We can't win a straight fight, so we don't fight straight. We do what he doesn't expect. Which is? We walk right up to his front door and kill him. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Rourke stared at her like he was seeing someone he didn't quite recognize. You're serious. Completely. He's got guards. Security. We'd never make it past the gate. We would if we went at night. If we planned it right. If we were willing to do whatever it took. Mara's voice didn't waver. You've killed before. So have I, probably, during the attack. What's one more if it saves everyone else? It's murder. Cold-blooded murder. No, it's war. And in war, you take out the enemy commander. She stood. You don't have to come. I'll do it myself if I have to, but I'm done playing defense. I'm done watching good people suffer because we're too afraid to do what needs doing. Rourke was quiet for a long time. Then, when? Soon. Before he moves again, before he burns out anyone else. She paused. And before you heal enough to stop me. I'm not going to stop you. I'm going with you. He pushed himself up, testing the leg. But we do this smart. We plan every detail. And we don't tell anyone else. Not Cobb, not Jessup, nobody. If this goes wrong, they can honestly say they didn't know. Agreed. They spent the next 2 days planning in whispers, working out the approach, the timing, the contingencies. Rourke drew maps from memory, marking guard positions, shift changes, the layout of Crane's house. Mara studied them until she could walk the route in her sleep. There's a servant entrance on the east side, Rourke explained. It's watched, but not as heavily as the main gates. We go in just after midnight during the shift change. 60 seconds where there's confusion, gaps in coverage. And once we're inside? Crane's bedroom is on the second floor, north corner. He sleeps alone. His wife left him years ago, couldn't stomach what he'd become. Rourke traced the path with his finger. We get in, we finish it, we get out. Fast and quiet. What if he's not alone? What if he has guards in the room? Then we improvise. But Mara, he looked at her. Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be murderers in the eyes of the law. The sheriff won't be able to protect us, even if he wanted to. I know. And you're still willing? She thought about Sarah Hobbs watching her home burn, about Jessup bleeding on the kitchen table, about all the people Crane had destroyed over the years, would continue destroying if someone didn't stop him.
I'm willing, she said. The night they chose was moonless and cold, clouds covering the stars like a shroud. They left the ranch after dark, telling Cobb they were checking the northern fence line. He didn't believe them. Mara could see it in his eyes, but he didn't ask questions either. They rode slow and careful, Rourke favoring his injured leg but managing. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said already. Crane's ranch appeared as a scattering of lights in the darkness. They dismounted a mile out and approached on foot, moving through scrub brush and around patches of open ground, where the moonlight might have exposed them if there'd been any moonlight. The servant entrance was exactly where Rourke remembered. A small door, poorly lit, with 2 guards visible nearby. They waited in the darkness, barely breathing, counting down the minutes until shift change. Midnight came. The guards left their posts, heading toward the main house where the replacements would meet them. 60 seconds of opportunity. Mara and Rourke moved. The door was locked, but old. Rourke had it open in 5 seconds with a piece of wire. They slipped inside into a narrow hallway that smelled of kitchen grease and wood smoke. No one challenged them. They found the stairs and climbed, each step a small eternity, every creak of the wood like a gunshot in the silence. The second-floor hallway was dark, doors closed. No sounds of life. Crane's room was where Rourke said it would be. They paused outside the door. Mara's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. This was it. The moment everything changed, Rourke tried the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty. Not just empty. Abandoned. The bed was made, but clearly unused. No personal items, no clothes, nothing that suggested anyone had slept here recently. "He's not here," Mara whispered. "I can see that." They searched the room quickly, looking for any indication of where Crane might be. Mara found it in a desk drawer, a telegram dated 2 days ago. "Arriving Canyon Creek tonight. Deal pending. Return when complete." E.C. Canyon Creek, a mining settlement 40 miles north. Crane wasn't even in the territory. "We came here for nothing," Mara said, the words tasting like ash. "Not nothing. We know he's not here. We know his security isn't as tight as he pretends." Rourke pocketed the telegram. "And we know he'll be back." "When?" "Telegram's 2 days old. Could be any time." Footsteps in the hallway froze them both. Mara and Rourke pressed against the wall on either side of the door, weapons ready. The footsteps came closer, stopped right outside. The door opened. A young man entered, carrying a lamp, clearly not expecting to find anyone. His eyes widened when he saw them. Rourke moved fast, grabbing the man and covering his mouth before he could shout. "Be quiet, and you live. Make noise, and you die. Nod if you understand." The man nodded frantically. "Where's Crane?" Rourke uncovered his mouth slightly. "Canyon Creek," the man gasped. "He left 3 days ago. Won't be back until next week." "Anyone else in the house?" "Just guards." "And the staff?" "Please, I don't want trouble." Rourke knocked him out with a quick blow to the temple. The man crumpled. "We need to leave," Mara said. "Now." They ran. Down the stairs, through the hallway, out the servant entrance. Behind them, shouting erupted as someone found the unconscious man. Gunshots cracked the night air. Mara and Rourke sprinted for the horses, bullets kicking up dirt around them. They mounted and rode hard, pushing the horses to their limits, not looking back. They didn't slow down until they were 5 miles out. The ranch lights long disappeared behind them. "That was close," Rourke said, breathing hard. "Too close." Mara's hands were shaking. "We almost got caught for nothing." "Not nothing. We tried. That counts." "Does it?" She could hear the bitterness in her own voice. "Crane's still out there, still a threat, and now he'll know someone broke into his house. He'll tighten security, be more careful. We just made everything harder." "Maybe. Or maybe we showed him he's not untouchable." Rourke slowed his horse to a walk. "Either way, we're alive. That's what matters." But Mara wasn't sure that was true anymore. They reached the ranch near dawn to find Cobb waiting on the porch, rifle across his knees. "Fence inspection go all right?" he asked dryly. "Ran into some trouble," Rourke said. "I bet." Cobb stood. "Jessup's asking for you. Says his ribs feel wrong." Mara went to check on Jessup and found him pale and sweating, his breathing shallow. She unwrapped his bandages and saw the infection spreading,
red streaks radiating from the wound, the flesh hot and swollen. "We need the doctor," she said.
"Already sent Cobb for him an hour ago," Jessup managed. I think this is bad, Mrs. Rourke. You're going to be fine. Don't lie to me. I can feel it." He coughed, wincing. "If I don't make it, you're going to make it. If I don't," he continued stubbornly, "tell my sister in Omaha what happened. Tell her I went down fighting something that mattered." "You're not going anywhere except back to health." But Mara's hands shook as she changed his bandages.
The doctor arrived and worked quickly, lancing the infection, packing the wound with clean cloth soaked in carbolic acid. Jessup screamed through a leather strap between his teeth. "It's bad," the doctor told them afterward. "Infection's in the blood. He might pull through, might not. Next 24 hours will tell." Mara sat with Jessup through the night, changing his bandages, wiping his forehead when the fever made him delirious. He rambled about his childhood, about his sister, about a girl he'd loved who'd married someone else. "I'm sorry," he said at one point, his eyes focusing on Mara. "Sorry I wasn't tougher. Should have been able to take a bullet without falling apart." "You took a bullet defending this place. That makes you the toughest person I know." He smiled weakly. "You're a terrible liar, ma'am." "Good thing I'm not lying." Jessup died just before sunrise, slipping away so quietly Mara almost didn't notice. One moment he was breathing, the next he wasn't, and the space he'd occupied felt suddenly vast and empty. She sat there for a long time, holding his cooling hand, thinking about all the ways this fight had cost them. Rourke found her there and knew without asking. "He was a good man," he said quietly. "He deserved better than this." "Yeah, he did." Rourke put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll bury him proper. Say the words. Mark the grave." They buried Jessup on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot where he could see the whole valley. Cobb carved a marker from wood. Mara picked wildflowers to lay on the fresh earth. "He was loyal," Rourke said, standing at the grave. "Brave. The kind of friend you hope for and rarely find. This land is better for having known him, and we're worse for having lost him." It wasn't much of a eulogy, but it was honest. That night, Mara sat on the porch and stared at the grave marker barely visible in the darkness. Another person dead because of Crane. Another life extinguished in this pointless war. Rourke joined her, his legs still bothering him but healing. "You're thinking about going after him again," he said. "I'm thinking about ending this, one way or another." He killed Jessup. Maybe not directly, but his bullet, his attack, his war. That's on him. She looked at Rourke. "And I'm going to make him answer for it. We'll make him answer for it. Together. You can barely walk. I'll manage." He sat beside her. "You're not doing this alone. Not anymore." They sat in silence, two broken people planning murder under an indifferent sky. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled like it was mourning with them. Word came 6 days later that Crane was back. A writer brought the news. Not one of Crane's men, but Tom Winters from the neighboring ranch, his face grim as he delivered the message. "He rode in yesterday with a dozen new guns," Tom said. "Hired men from Canyon Creek, the kind who kill for wages and don't ask questions. And he's been talking, saying things about what he's going to do to you both. Ugly things." Mara and Rourke exchanged glances across the kitchen table. "How long do we have?" Rourke asked. "Hard to say. Could be days, could be hours. But he's not done with you, that's certain." Tom shifted his weight. "My offer still stands. You need help. We'll come. All of us." "No." Mara's voice was firm. "We've already gotten Jessup killed. I won't risk anyone else. It's our choice to make. And we're choosing to handle this ourselves." She stood. "But thank you. For everything." After Tom left, Mara walked to Jessup's grave and stood there for a long time, thinking about sacrifice and vengeance and the thin line between justice and murder. Rourke found her there as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. "You're planning something," he said. "I'm planning to finish this, tonight." She didn't look at him. "Crane thinks he can wait us out, wear us down, eventually take what he wants. He's wrong." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we don't wait for him to come here. We go to him, now, while he's comfortable, while he thinks he's safe." Mara turned to face Rourke. "We end this the way it should have ended 6 days ago." "My leg's better, but I'm not back to full strength yet." "Then I go alone." "The hell you will. Rourke's jaw set. We're partners. We do this together or not at all.
Mara studied his face. The scars, the lines carved by hard years, the eyes that had seen too much death and still chose to keep fighting. You know this is probably suicide. I've made peace with that. Have you? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He took her hand, something he rarely did, their fingers interlacing. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know, I don't regret any of this. The marriage, the fight, bringing you here. Even if it ends badly, it was worth it.
Mara felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there.
Why?
Because you reminded me what it feels like to be alive instead of just surviving. Because you didn't break when everything tried to break you. Because... He stopped, searching for words. Because you matter. To me. More than I expected. She squeezed his hand. If we die tonight, I need you to know. I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you. And I've never felt less alone than I have here, with you, even with everything falling apart around us. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow built something worth defending. Let's not die then, Rourke said finally. Agreed, but if we do, we go down swinging. They prepared with this kind of meticulous care that comes from knowing there won't be second chances. Checked every weapon, loaded extra ammunition, planned 3 different approaches depending on what they found when they arrived. Cobb tried to argue his way into coming with them, but Rourke shut him down. Someone needs to stay here, guard the place. If we don't come back, it's yours, all of it. Papers are in the lockbox, signed and witnessed. Rourke gripped Cobb's shoulder. Live better than we did. That's all I ask. You're coming back, Cobb said stubbornly. Probably not, but hope's free. They left just after midnight, riding under a sky so clear the stars seemed close enough to touch. The temperature had dropped hard, frost forming on the grass, breath misting in front of their faces. Neither spoke during the ride. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said already. They were committed now, locked into a course that would end with someone dead. Crane or them? Maybe all 3. Crane's ranch appeared as a constellation of lights in the darkness. More than usual, Mara noticed. He'd increased security after their first attempt, just like she'd predicted. They dismounted a mile out and approached on foot, moving slowly through the darkness, watching for patrols. 2 guards passed within 20 yards of where they crouched in the scrub brush, talking about cards and women and how much they were getting paid. Crane's spooked, one said. Got men on double shifts, personally checking the locks every night. Someone really got under his skin. Heard it was Rourke's wife, crazy woman, from what they say. Cursed or touched or something. Whatever she is, she's got balls. Breaking into the boss's house like that. Mara smiled grimly in the darkness. Good. Let them be afraid. They waited for the patrol to pass, then moved closer. The house loomed ahead, every window lit, guards visible on the porch and at the corners. Getting in the way they had before would be impossible. We need a distraction, Mara whispered. What kind of distraction? She pointed to the barn on the south side of the property. Fire. Everyone rushes to save the horses. We slip in through the confusion. That's a lot of innocent animals. We'll open the stalls first, give them a chance to run. She met his eyes. Unless you have a better idea. He didn't. They circled wide, approaching the barn from the blind side. 2 guards stood watch, but they were focused on the house, not the barn. Mara and Rourke moved like shadows, closing the distance in heartbeats. Rourke took the first guard from behind, a hand over his mouth, a knife between his ribs, quick and quiet. The man died without a sound. Mara hesitated with the second guard, her knife raised, looking at the back of his head and thinking about what it meant to kill someone in cold blood. The guard turned. His eyes widened. His mouth opened to shout. Mara drove the knife into his throat before conscious thought caught up with instinct. Blood sprayed hot across her hands. The guard made a wet choking sound and crumpled. She stood there, shaking, staring at what she'd done. Mara, Rourke's voice cut through the shock. Stay with me. We're not done. She nodded, unable to speak, and followed him into the barn. They moved quickly, opening every stall, driving the horses out into the night. The animals sensed the danger and ran willingly, disappearing into the darkness in a thunder of hoofbeats. Then Rourke set the fire. It caught fast, feeding on dry hay and old wood. Within minutes, flames were climbing the walls, smoke billowing into the night sky. Shouting erupted from the house. Men poured out, running for the barn, for the well, for anything that could stop the blaze from spreading. Mara and Rourke ran for the house in the chaos, slipping through the front door while everyone else was running out. Inside was pandemonium, servants rushing around, guards shouting orders, smoke beginning to seep through the walls. They found the stairs and climbed. Second floor, north wing, Crane's bedroom. The door was locked this time. Rourke kicked it open. As Crane sat at his desk, a revolver in his hand, pointed directly at them. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he'd been waiting. "Wondered when you'd try again," he said calmly. "Figured you'd use the fire as cover. Would have done the same thing myself." "Put the gun down," Rourke said. "No, I don't think I will." Crane smiled. "You broke into my home. I'm well within my rights to shoot you both dead. Self-defense. The law would applaud me. The law would investigate. Find out what you've been doing all these years. The people you've hurt. The lives you've destroyed." Mara's voice was steadier than she felt. "We're not the only ones you've made into enemies." "True, but you're the only one stupid enough to come after me directly." Crane stood, the gun never wavering. "I'll give you credit. You've been more trouble than most. But it ends here. Tonight." "You're right about that," Mara said. "It does end here." She moved, not toward Crane, but sideways, diving behind a heavy dresser as the gunshot cracked. Wood splintered where she'd been standing. Rourke fired at the same moment, his bullet catching Crane in the shoulder, spinning him around. Crane's next shot went wild, punching a hole in the ceiling. Mara came around the dresser, her own gun up, and fired. The bullet took Crane in the chest, dead center, dropping him to his knees. He looked surprised, like he'd never really believed it could end this way. His gun clattered to the floor. "You," he started, blood bubbling at his lips. Mara walked closer, her gun steady. "I was nobody. Nothing. A woman you thought you could use to hurt someone I care about. You were wrong." She pulled the trigger again. Crane fell backward, dead before he hit the ground. Rourke was already moving, grabbing Mara's arm. "We need to go, now!" They ran, down the stairs, through the smoke-filled hallway, out into the chaos of the burning barn. Guards were everywhere, but none paying attention to the house, all focused on the fire spreading faster than they could contain it. Mara and Rourke reached their horses and mounted, riding hard into the night, while behind them Crane's empire burned. They didn't stop until they were 10 miles out, the horizon behind them glowing orange and red. "We did it," Mara said, her voice hollow. "We killed him. Yes, I killed him. I pulled the trigger." She looked at her hands, still sticky with blood from the guard she'd knifed. "I'm a murderer. You're a survivor. There's a difference." "Is there?" Her voice cracked. "Because right now it feels exactly the same." Rourke pulled his horse close to hers, reached over and took her face in his hands. "Listen to me. You did what needed doing to protect what's yours, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not murder. That's justice. Justice shouldn't feel this empty. No, but it usually does." He let go of her face. "Come on. Let's go home." The ranch was quiet when they arrived near dawn, Cobb standing guard on the porch with his rifle. His eyes widened when he saw them, blood-stained, exhausted, but alive. "Is it done?" he asked. "It's done," Rourke said. "And Crane?" "Dead." Cobb let out a long breath. "Then it's really over." "Maybe. We'll see." Rourke dismounted stiffly. "If his men come looking for revenge, we'll deal with it. But I'm betting most of them were hired guns who'll scatter now that their paymaster's gone." He was right. The revenge Mara had braced for never came. Crane's men disappeared like smoke, taking whatever they could carry and leaving his empire to collapse into legal battles and territorial claims that would tie up the courts for years. The sheriff came by 3 days later, asking questions about the fire, about Crane's death. Mara and Rourke told him they'd been home all night, had witnesses to prove it. The sheriff looked skeptical but let it drop. "Funny thing," he said before leaving. "Isaac Crane made a lot of enemies over the years. Could have been anyone who finally settled accounts. Territory's probably better off without him, if I'm being honest." "Probably.
Rourke agreed. After the sheriff left, Mara stood on the porch and watched the sunset over land that felt different somehow, quieter, like a held breath finally released. Days turned into weeks. The ranch began to heal, to rebuild. Neighbors who'd been too afraid to help before showed up offering labor, materials, solidarity. The community that Crane had fractured through fear started knitting itself back together. Sarah Hobbs came by with her sons and helped rebuild the barn. Tom Winters brought cattle to replace the ones they'd lost. Even people from Sundrift, people who'd called Mara cursed and driven her out, showed up with cautious apologies and careful respect. "Heard what you did?" one woman said. "Standing up to Crane like that took courage most of us don't have." Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and got back to work. Rourke's leg healed slowly but completely. He worked alongside Mara and Cobb and the rotating crew of neighbors, rebuilding what had been destroyed, strengthening what remained. And somewhere in the midst of all that labor and healing, something shifted between Mara and Rourke. The careful distance they'd maintained collapsed into something warmer, more certain. They didn't talk about it, didn't make pronouncements or declarations. It just happened, natural as weather. One night, 6 months after Crane's death, Mara found Rourke on the porch, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Never could. Not after—" He gestured vaguely. "Everything." She sat beside him. "Do you regret it? What we did?" "No, but I think about it. Wonder if there was another way." "There wasn't. We tried everything else." Mara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Sometimes the only way through is the hard way." "Yeah." He put his arm around her. "But we made it through. That counts for something." They sat like that for a long time. Two people who'd walked through fire and come out the other side, changed but unbroken. The years that followed were hard but good. The ranch prospered. The land yielded what it could, and they made it enough. Mara learned to be more than just a survivor. She learned to build, to create, to nurture growing things. And when the injured girl showed up 3 years later, half-starved and beaten, running from a situation Mara recognized too well, she took her in without hesitation. "What's your name?" Mara asked, cleaning the girl's wounds. "Claire." "Well, Claire, you're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you here." Mara met the girl's frightened eyes. "And if you want to learn how to make sure they never hurt you again, I can teach you that too." Claire stayed, learned to shoot, to ride, to stand her ground. Mara taught her everything Rourke had taught her: how to survive, how to fight, how to transform fear into strength. She wasn't the last. Over the years, others came. Women and men who'd been broken by circumstances beyond their control, looking for a place to heal, to start over, to become something more than victims. The ranch became a refuge, not openly advertised, but known to those who needed to know. And Mara, who'd once been the woman everyone wanted gone, became the person people sought out when they had nowhere else to turn. Rourke watched it all with quiet pride. "You've built something here," he said one evening, watching Mara teach Claire and 2 other girls how to mend fence properly. "Something that matters." "We built it," Mara corrected. "You and me, together. I just provided the land. You made it mean something." He died 12 years after Crane. Not from violence, but from simple hard living, wearing out a body that had endured too much for too long. One morning, he just didn't wake up, his heart finally giving out in his sleep. Mara buried him in the orchard they'd planted together, under the apple trees that were just starting to bear fruit. She carved the marker herself, kept it simple the way he would have wanted. Called her Rourke. He survived. It seemed like enough. Standing at his grave after the handful of mourners had left, Mara felt the weight of everything they'd been through together. The violence and the healing, the fear and the courage, the slow transformation from 2 broken people into something that resembled a family. "Thank you," she said to the fresh earth, "for taking a chance on a cursed woman nobody wanted, for teaching me I was worth more than that." The wind moved through the apple trees, rustling the leaves, and Mara took it as answer enough. She ran the ranch for another 20 years, training others, protecting those who needed protection, building something that outlasted the violence that had birthed it. Claire grew into a strong, capable woman who eventually took over when Mara got too old to manage everything herself. "You taught me how to survive," Claire said.
Now, let me take care of you for a change. So Mara stepped back, spending her days on the porch Rourke had built, watching the land that had been hostile become home. She saw new families settling in, building their own ranches, raising children who would never know what it was like when Isaac Crane controlled everything through fear. The world changed, as worlds do. Technology crept in. Railroads extended their reach. The frontier became less wild and more civilized. But the ranch remained, a constant in the shifting landscape. On her last day, Mara sat in the rocking chair and watched the sun set over hills she'd fought to keep. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis, her hair white, her body worn down by 8 decades of hard living, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Claire sat beside her, holding her hand. How do you want to be remembered? Mara thought about it, about the cursed woman who'd arrived in Sundrift with nothing, about the fights, the losses, the small victories that had added up to a life, about Rourke and Jessup and all the others who'd helped her become something more than prey. I don't need to be remembered, she said finally. The land remembers. That's enough. She died that night, slipping away as quietly as Rourke had, and they buried her next to him under the apple trees that had grown tall and strong. The ranch didn't end with her death. It continued, generation after generation, a place where people who'd been broken could come to heal, where survivors learned to fight back, where the legacy of a woman who refused to break lived on in the strength of those who followed. And sometimes on quiet evenings, when the wind moved just right through the orchard, people said they could feel her presence. Not haunting, just watching. Making sure the land she'd fought for remained a place of refuge instead of fear. Because Mara Vale had learned something essential in her years on that ranch. Survival isn't about avoiding pain or hardship. It's about enduring them, transforming them, using them to forge something stronger than what tried to break you. She'd arrived with nothing and left everything. Not wealth or fame, but something more valuable. Proof that people can change, that circumstances don't define you, that even the most broken can become the storm others fear. The land remembered her name, and in the end, that was exactly enough.